Welcome back to Honest Gaming Reviews. So today we're going to be talking about the Oculus Quest 2, and that is because even though it's been out for a really long time, I still have a lot of people asking me, since I own one, if it's really worth getting. So here's my opinions about the Oculus Quest 2. The Oculus Quest 2 is a really nice VR system in the fact that it is completely transportable. Everything, the operating, all that is done inside of the headset itself. It does have a pretty decent battery life as far as, being able to unplug it and walk away. Um, I've heard a lot of people trying to hook it up like to their computer, and that improves the FPS speeds and some of the stuff on that because through the headset itself you only really get about 30 FPS, which is kind of a letdown. But again, to have a fully autonomous VR headset that you can just walk around in your room and be able to play the game, you can take it with you when you go on a trip, stuff like that. That's really, really nice. So you kind of have to compare and contrast what you're getting. The Oculus series does have several other really good headsets out there, like the Oculus Rift, and now they have the Meta Quest Pro, I believe is what they're calling it. And I've heard that one's really good as well, but I personally haven't used that one. So, back to the Oculus Quest 2. The one thing that most people don't understand with Oculus Quest 2 is the games. There are a lot of games that are made for the Oculus Quest 2, and they're a lot of fun to play. However, there's a lot of already existing VR games that get turned into Oculus Quest 2 VR games. And what happens is most of these other gaming headsets are designed to run off of your computer, off of your computer's operating system. So you get 60 to even 120 FPS on some of these other headsets. So what happens is it's kind of the whole console versus computer debate that you get from a lot of people. But this time, it's a headset versus the computer. When you have 30 FPS and you're playing against people who have 120 FPS or even just 60 FPS, there's a huge latency and you'll just completely miss stuff that's happening. And that's kind of a big deal. And it's kind of a problem. And you really shouldn't have that kind of a problem, in my opinion. Um, there's also not really a way in the grand majority of games to select to play just on Quest 2 against other Quest 2 users. It is there in some games, to be fair about that. It is there in some games, but it is not there in all games. So that is kind of a big problem. The pass-through feature is really nice on it, being able to look through the headset and see the, world around you and be able to do stuff. However, the hassle you have to go through sometimes to get to the pass through, like if you're in the middle of your game and you just pause it and you want to be able to look through it, you have to jump through a couple of hoops in order to be able to use pass through. And with that being the case, it's almost more beneficial to just stumble and fumble your way around in order to be able to use it. It's not like there's a hotkey most of the time. As far as I'm aware, you can set one up, in which case it's really handy, but even just setting that up is a bit of a challenge. Beyond that, the battery life really fluctuates. I know I already talked about the battery life, but I just thought of this. Depending on the game you play, the battery life does fluctuate a lot. So, for example, I play a lot of Zero Caliber Reloaded with some of my friends. Problem being, it is a higher quality game. Let's just put it that way. So it uses all the frames and it uses a lot more battery to render the game because it's got a lot better graphics. Again, most of the graphics in Oculus Quest are not very good. I will say that, but again, it's the headset that you're paying for. You're paying for walkability instead of being hooked up to your computer. So you got to compare and contrast there too what you want. But again, the battery life does fluctuate a lot. So for me personally, what I do when I use my Oculus is I hook it up to the charging cord for that particular headset because, and this is another important thing to know, I'll get back to the rest of what I'm talking about. But using a cord that is not designed to be used with your Oculus Quest is kind of like most of you are probably old enough to remember, and sometimes it does still happen, but the old Samsung and other Android devices, when you hooked them up to other charging cords that were not designed for those devices, the device would charge slower because it knew it wasn't the right charging device, or because that charging cord wasn't rated to as high of an amperage, which is just the amount of power that it can come through the specific cord. And then that device would charge slower. And that's exactly what happens with the Oculus. If you hook it up to a different cord that it's not supposed to be hooked up to, it will charge a lot slower, and then you you'll just have a very slow charging device. Which for me, with what I do, I can't have that because I'm trying to play for 6 to 8 hours without it dying. And when I'm playing these games, you really only get about 3 to 4 hours before the battery dies, which is not necessarily convenient. It is if you're just playing some light stuff, if you're playing VR chat or whatever. It really depends on the rooms you go to, but you'll get like 6 hours of battery life. If you're like just chilling in like Creator Studio or something like that, just wandering around some like basic worlds, you might get 7 hours. When I first got the headset, I could go play VR chat for 8 hours, but after having it for like 3 years now, you don't get that much anymore. You really don't. But again, I hook it up to my Oculus charging cord, and I hook that up to an extension cord, 15-foot extension cord, and then I can walk all around wherever I want to go, plenty of room. And the charging cord with the Oculus Quest, while I'm using it, no matter what game I'm playing, it charges my Oculus faster than it can drain the battery. So I will keep my Oculus headset and I'll play with it and I'll get it down to like 3% battery life, then I'll plug it in and it'll charge it all the way back up to 100% again. But to be fair, if you're playing games while you do that, it does take a good bit of time to charge itself all the way back up. So do be warned about that. But the Oculus Quest 2, even with the battery issues, even with the charging cord issues, it's a lot of fun. I don't know quite what the price is on it now, but when I first got it, it was $400 for the one I got. I got a 256 gigabyte. But let's talk about the storage now on that. So they have three different options the last time I looked. They had like a 58 gigabyte, a 156, I think it was, or maybe it was a 132, and then the 256, which is what I have. I got that because I thought I was going to need a massive amount of storage. Currently on my Oculus, I have about 80 games downloaded, and I think I've used like maybe 10% of the battery or 10% of the storage. So you really don't need a crap ton of storage unless you're someone who's going to be playing like every game in existence. It's just not necessary. The one thing that is nice about it though, and I'll tell you this, is if you're recording videos on your Oculus and you're saving them to your Oculus, having the extra storage is very helpful because these Oculus videos take a lot of space. They take a lot of data just because of the way that they're designed in recording. They just do. So if you're going to be recording videos on the Oculus, definitely spend the extra $100. Get the 256. It's worth it. For the price range, if it really is still $100 cheaper, go ahead and get the smaller one. If you're just like a normal Joe Schmo, you just want to get it to play around with, whatever. You're not going to be super serious into gaming. You're going to get like the plank walk one to go prank your grandma with, or, something like that. And that's totally fine. That's data space. It's more than enough to do any of that kind of stuff that you want to do. So, the Oculus Quest, it really is just, kind of a casual gamer's headset. That's really what it is. And in that case, the Oculus Quest is great. The Oculus Quest 2. So, with that being the thought, then, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to tell you, in my personal experience, there's a lot of downsides when you're playing games cross-platform with like Rift users or other higher-end VR headset users. And that's really frustrating. It makes it really hard to play some of these games and enjoy it. However, with that being the case, you can still, in some games, select to play on just the Oculus Quest 2, which is really nice. So I'll give them that much. It is an option in some games. I think it's just a matter of time until all of them will be that way. And that will be really nice. Aside from that, I don't see a reason why not to get the Oculus Quest 2. And here's the other reason why on that. If you wanted to, you can get an Oculus Link cable. Now be careful which ones you get because the Oculus Link cables are expensive. So a lot of people try and get the cheap knockoff versions from Amazon or other places. The problem being is most of them are not rated properly as far as the amperage for charging the headset and as far as the data that can go through it. And it only lets a lower amount of data through, so you don't see an increase in your FPS or anything else related to that. And that is a huge problem. So make sure you get, whether it's the Oculus Quest link cable or not, make sure you get one that has the same specs as the Oculus Link cable. But if you're doing that anyways, it's still going to be roughly the same price. And at that point, you might as well just get the Oculus Link cable because then you're guaranteed that it'll work. Because the other thing I've seen too is sometimes the Oculus Quest reads those other cables as malware and it doesn't let it work at all with the Quest 2. So again, just something to be aware of. But yeah, overall, Oculus Quest 2, great for casual. It's cheap, it's easy to use, easy to set up. It takes maybe 5 minutes to set it up. Another big problem with it that I just thought of this too, the internet connection is set up to be on a 5 gigahertz internet Wi-Fi. So whatever, if you've got 1 gigabyte, if you've got 600 megabyte download speeds, whatever, you can forget all of that because if you're not hooked up to a 5 gigahertz downloading speed internet, let me put that in a better way. So I assume most of you out there aren't IT people, but there are some IT people. And you can set up different channels on your Wi-Fi system itself. Like currently I have Wi-Fi that's set up to be at 5 gigahertz and 2.4 gigahertz. But the Oculus Quest is only designed to properly download at full speed on a 5 gigahertz network connection. And I previously had it not hooked up to that, and it could take an hour to 2, 3, 4 hours to download some of these games, even though they're small games, like 2 gigabytes or something like that. That's not really a good downloading speed. It just isn't. So just beware of that. Whatever your internet connection is, try and see if you can set up a 5 gigahertz, and that should help you have a better connection. Other than that, again, I'll just say overall, good headset for casual play. Someone just looking to get their grandma to walk off a plank and think she's falling off of a 180-story building or something, wanting to go on virtual roller coaster rides, a lot of stuff like that. It's really fun as far as that aspect goes. But as far as serious VR gaming goes, not a good headset unless you can hook it up to your computer and have it charging. In that case, it would be good. I will end up making some videos about Oculus Quest 2 games, so if you are interested in certain games on there, I've played a lot of them. Feel free to ask me questions about those in the comments or whatever, and I might make some videos about them. Otherwise, I've got a lot of games on there, and I will be making videos about those as well. Just because, again, I've been asked lots of questions, even though the Quest 2 has been out for 3 years. What kind of games it's got, how to set it up, how to connect it, how things play on it, and really just how good the headset is. But since we covered the headset, we'll cover the games in other videos.